In the absence of our secretary, we have no minutes to approve, so we'll have to suspend that agenda item for the moment. And let me update you. We received another resume for the clerk's position. It looks promising. I will get in touch with this person this week and set up a time to visit with her so we can get that mobilized, because I think we're coming into the season where we're going to need that help desperately, actually, because there's going to be stuff that's coming up at the beginning of December. So I will keep you apprised of that. I want to review the subcommittee assignments once more, just to be sure everybody's clear on what they have. So we have, for the schools, Kevin, John Boynton, Chuck, and Gwendy. Capital is Doug and myself. Pensions and insurance is Scott, Chuck, and myself. Consolidated facilities is Doug and Clinton. Public safety, fire, police, management is Margie, Kevin, Doug, and Lucinda. General government, Brian, Chris, Tom. Library, Jean, John Boynton. DPW, Brian, Chris, Scott, Tom Hurley. Parks and Rec, Chuck, Scott, Clinton. Boards and committees, Tom, Doug, Chris Hart. Cemetery, Jean, and Gwendy. Steve, have you any preference where you would like to be?
DPW. I'll volunteer. It's not schools.
Just not schools. We have schools we've got covered. I think we're happy with that. So if DPW is a choice, that's fine. Everybody is more or less on 2, so I'm going to ask you to serve on another, just to make sure we have at least 2 on 3 on the big kind of complex ones. So you have a choice between library, which is not big and complex, but it's important, and cemetery anyway, because those only have 2. Cemetery, okay.
That's a fun one.
Okay, that's done. I will circulate the list, and later on in the meeting, we'll talk about how we want to constitute ourselves to meet with the appropriate groups in the town. Tonight's meeting, effectively, is to orient us, as the Warrant Committee, to introduce us, the Warrant Committee, to the various departments of the town. Mike Dennehy is here with representatives from the schools and a couple of other departments to give us an overview of what is happening and how to set more or less in place how we're going to interact in the brave new world. Mike, we're happy to have you here, and I'll let you coordinate speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Back for my second budget. As we advertised previously, town accountant and myself have been reaching, the department heads submitted their budgets to us last Friday. We have a series of meetings after the holiday to go over the budgets. We set some parameters across the board. Our general expenses, we're looking to increase 1% over last year. Our utilities consistent across the board with all the departments at 3%. All of the budgets are in. Additionally, we have asked that the capital requests come in. I sat with the Capital Improvement Committee last Wednesday morning to go over our first round of some of the capital requests for the year. That went very, very well. We're following up next Monday morning with that. But basically, Tom had reached out and thought it would be a good idea for this committee to learn about what goes on behind the curtain, if you will, with some of the financial experts in the town on the school side and the town side. So with me tonight, town accountant Amy Dexter, town treasurer Jim McAuliffe, town assessor Bob Bushway, and members from the school committee, Superintendent Gormley, Assistant Superintendent Glenn Pavlicek, and school committee chair Kevin Donahue notably will get up and speak to how the school puts some stuff together with the plan that when the budgets come to you, either in the subcommittee or committee form, that you know where the numbers are coming from to get to the warrant. So just some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, the day-to-day operations that Jim's office may face and what Amy's group does on a daily basis. So I appreciate Tom reaching out and being here tonight. So I think just a little introduction from these people as to how they do it, and maybe some back and forth question from them, obviously with some time constraints, and we'll get through it. But I think without further ado, we'll bring the school department up here to talk about their budget.
And when you come, please introduce yourself so that we all know to whom we're addressing questions. If we need them, we'll pull them up. There should be enough. There should be enough.
Thank you. Wayne, you gonna come up? Sure. So, good evening. Thank you for hosting us. I'm Kevin Donahue. I'm the chairman of the school committee. On my left, we have Superintendent Gormley. We have Dr. Elaine Craighead, who is the chair of our finance subcommittee. And to my right, we have Alan Jack, who is our assistant superintendent for business affairs. So in terms of our budget process, we have a budget process that I think you'll be very familiar with. It runs parallel to the town side, where the fire and the police, their budgets report into the town administrator. We work parallel to that. We construct our budget based on the prior year's budget. We have a finance subcommittee that deals with the particulars of our budget. They meet on a near weekly basis. And this time of the year, we take our current commitments, contractual commitments, and other commitments in our current staffing levels. We roll those forward into the coming year, adjusted for contractual increases in pay, negotiated contractual changes, for example, with our transportation budget, and then we present that to you. There are sometimes changes in staffing level that are dictated on specific enrollment. Frequently, we will have special needs enrollment changes that may dictate changing in staffing levels, and when that occurs, we highlight those. And we indicate that those are required staffing priorities, and we have the discussion with you about where those positions would go and where the funding would need to come from. But that's our budgeting process in a nutshell.
Do you have an idea of how comprehensive the initial budget will be? Because I think one of the issues that we want to be sure is as we receive the information, it's going to be as complete so we don't have to reinvent the wheel and go back and forth 5 times over the same budget item. That just wastes a lot of time and frustrates many people.
Right. My understanding, it will be quite comprehensive. I'll defer to our assistant superintendent here, see if you'd like to opine further.
As of this morning, we had a finance subcommittee at 6:45 this morning, and basically we have the numbers in place now to be present to the school committee for their final vote to bring to you. I have the spreadsheets for the personnel that show every position and what they were at, what step and lane they'll be on next year, what the salaries are, just rolling existing staff forward. On the non-salary side, where we don't have contracts, we're using the same assumptions that the town is using, 1% on goods and services, 3% on utilities. We have some medical costs that we're using at 6%. Some of our out-of-district special education costs and medical costs are a higher inflation rate. But those are the same parameters that we're using pretty much on the town side. We agreed to those in advance. So I think you'll see we've worked through it. I don't expect substantive changes from this point out. I think the Finance Subcommittee has looked it over pretty closely. And as I say, they made the recommendation this morning to send to the school committee on the 6th, which is their meeting for the final vote.
6th of December?
Yes.
Okay, when would we effectively be able to see?
7.
Perfect. Good. Okay, that answers the question. Does anybody have any questions for the schools? Tom?
Just a couple, Glenn, I guess to Glenn, or actually maybe to the whole committee. The town administrator has been tasked, under the new Strong Town Administrator bylaw with giving a balanced budget to the Warrant Committee. I guess my question is, how closely are you working with the town administrator, and will we actually see a balanced budget when it comes to the Warrant Committee, or is it going to be the same town side, school side?
So I have a minor quibble with your terminology there. The town administrator has been tasked with presenting a budget. His charge does not indicate that he is required to present a balanced budget, which I think is a key difference. That being said, our intent is to work as closely as we need to with the town administrator and the selectmen to make sure that that the numbers are as close as they can be to being balanced when we present.
Could I just also say that, of course, as you know, the revenue side of the picture is still
Yeah,
very preliminary
very,
at this point. We don't know state aid till consensus revenue estimates in mid to late December and so forth. So a balanced budget, quote unquote, at the beginning of December probably isn't a balanced budget. You know.
How significant is the variable, would be the differentiator?
Well, I think on the revenue side, on the property tax side, we know the
Yes.
new growth, we know 2.5% and so forth.
Right.
It really depends on where the state comes in on state aid, which is our second biggest piece, because it has fluctuated from year to year. This year we saw a decrease in circuit breaker revenues because they didn't fully fund it. All of these things kick into play, but when they come to their consensus on where state revenues are, we'll have a better idea to what extent they'll be able to fund local aid, and that's, as I say, probably not till late December, early January.
Anticipating the fluctuation in state aid, do you factor in any contingencies as to scenarios that might be constructed if it is at 80% of expectation, or 50 or 60 or 110%, where the cuts would be if necessary, or where you would augment if necessary? Is that part of the discipline?
Oh, it will be, I think, when we get a little closer. I mean, right now, we're just looking at what a rollover is for our budget, basically. The town's looking what rollovers are for their budget, so we know what we'll know what the state of the community is for a rollover. And then once we find out a little more on revenue, I think we all have to sit down and decide, well, then if we're only at 93% of what we need, where does that other 7% come from? And I think, but at this point, we haven't really looked at what happens if we get X% of what we need to roll the system.
Right. Is that a worthwhile conversation to have? I mean, nobody likes to make cuts. We're all particularly in schools, but that may end up being an unfortunate discussion.
It generally happens, and generally happens probably around the beginning of January when our numbers are a little better, when we start saying we seem to be short as a town. And then I think everyone just looks in and says, well, if this scenario plays out, where did we go?
Right.
At the moment, trying to guess a scenario, pick an arbitrary number, I think just serves to frighten people at this point. I would like to have a more reasonable number before we start talking about, well, X positions will be cut or this program won't exist or something like that. I think we need to get a little closer to the...
No, I think that's reasonable. What I want to avoid, though, is a scramble at the very end. I think we all want to avoid that, which is why I caution, preparation is always, I think, a very, very good thing to think about. But are there any other questions?
I do. Good evening. So you talked about inflationary increases, contractual obligations, so you throw that into the mix when you roll over from this year. What about student enrollment? Are you seeing that the increases in student enrollment that would drive staffing increases, decreases, sort of maybe a little historical on where enrollment is?
We were talking about this morning, in fact. We have a new, we belong to a group called NASDAQ, which does our enrollment projections for us. It's no secret for the last few years our elementary enrollment has been going up. We are maxing out in the capacity of our elementary schools, and their projection is that our elementary schools will see 150 new students in the next 5 years. At the moment, we don't have places to put them. So I think the major reason you're not seeing we haven't talked about an increase in elementary school teachers, for instance, is we don't have any more rooms to put them in. So it is going to be this is a discussion for our facility subcommittee as well, as to look at what these enrollment trends are saying and what we need to do about it, and how we need to address them. Because it's been happening over the last few years. It's a combination of factors. Just a 2-second bite, if you look at how many children were born in Milton 5 years ago and how many of them now attend kindergarten here, it's 130%, which means not only are they all coming, but they're bringing their friends and relatives from out of town who weren't even born here, so we're getting a huge move in the pre-elementary grades. That and 10 years ago, 20% of elementary school students went to private or parochial schools. Now it's 10% elementary school students in Milton go to private or parochial schools. So
follow up with,
they're coming.
Sure. Just a follow-up question around, what's class size, student-teacher ratio? Is it contractually driven?
No. The elementary schools, it's between 22 and 26, depending on the grade. The middle school and high school get higher. Some of the high school classes are 35 and up. Some of them, like that have labs, for instance, are capped by the size of the number of benches. A science lab in the high school is going to be no more than 28 because there aren't any more places to put them. But there aren't contractual limitations, but we have our guidelines that we just don't want to see. For instance, elementary school
So
students.
we're going to include in our presentation the research from NESDEC. They do the presentations for all of the school districts. And when they presented at school committee on TV, they said they've only seen 2 communities in the Commonwealth that had this kind of enrollment. So we'll include that in our presentation for you,
Okay.
with lots of historical data and projections.
And to build on what the superintendents have said, in our budget presentations to you as a committee, when we provide you with a level service budget, we identify the sort of the micro issue of student enrollment. So if we have pockets of enrollment that require additional FTEs, whether it's a new elementary classroom, or we have certain special education needs that require additional FTEs, we identify those as additional FTEs and say this is part of our level service requirement, that we need additional FTEs to meet the same services that we provided last year, whether it's based on enrollment, in different spots. The sort of macro question of what we're going to do with these expected students is quite frankly a capital discussion that we're in the middle of ourselves. So we will obviously keep you apprised of that as it develops.
Great, thank you.
I was just going to make a comment. Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong. It's a pretty big presentation that we'll get. I just want to prepare everybody for that.
Yes.
It's very fulsome. It's a big PowerPoint with all the backup. So I don't think we should really, with the analysis from the consultant on enrollment and transportation costs and special education, so I just don't think we should get ahead of ourselves. It's a lot of data, and it's really well done. And I think in the past, the committee and Superintendent Gorley and Glenn will come and make a presentation to us, and I think we'll have to digest it all.
Yes.
It will feed, questions can come to the committee.
Yes.
We'll meet with the, with the appropriate people, and then they'll come back. So that seemed to have worked in the past.
And the subcommittee, sifting through any of the details that I think come up, will, I hope, obviate some of the problems that might arise otherwise. So we're optimistic that that'll work in everybody's interest. Are there any other
And if I
questions?
might,
Oh, please.
Over the years, sometimes there would be a new warrant committee who wanted a tutorial on special education or your question on enrollment. So any specific questions you have, we can bring the appropriate personnel and do a 10-minute presentation if you wanted a tutorial on any of it.
That's helpful. Are there any, Margie?
Are we allowed to take a little tour of the school?
Absolutely.
Someone once said no. I didn't understand that. Of course, it just maybe.
I take one every morning.
Well, maybe some of the other members we were able to see first.
One, two, small groups of you, just ring me.
Okay.
I'll set you up at whatever schools you want with the principals, and they'd be proud. And so that will put a face to the buildings, to what you're doing.
That might be very helpful to the
So just
administrator.
contact me. We'll work around your schedules.
Tom?
Just one other question for Glenn. Yeah, unlike other departments within the town, the school has multiple funding sources. What we get to see as a budget really is not a budget, it's a funding request for the town. It's just the town's share. Is there a district-wide budget that includes all funding sources?
Sure. And in fact, one of the spreadsheets I give you will have all the other funding sources in it. You'll get a chart with our grants. You'll get a chart with our revolving funds. So you'll be able to, I do one spreadsheet that's just basically just general fund, and another that includes some of the extras, so you can see what the full cost of a program is. You know, when I say we have $4.3 million in out-of-district tuitions, well, the town only has to pick up $3 million of that because I'm getting $1.4 million in from circuit breaker. So you have to see that in order to see the full cost. If our budget's $44 million in round numbers from general fund, if you include all the other funds, it's more like 48, 49 million. If you really want to get technical and include the town's contribution for health insurance, you know, plowing the roads, et cetera, which I have to do once a year for the state, you're up in the 50s because, you know, there are offsets from all the other town. So it depends how far you want to go. I can give you the state one that shows you every penny spent on road repair on behalf of the schools, but I don't think you want to see it. But I mean, we certainly include all of our revolving funds and grant sources and other things like that.
So there will be, in essence, a budget that will show salary, you know, for the whole district?
All the salaries are in the breakout. In my salary pages, you'll see, you know, in the teachers, it may list all the teachers, and then at the bottom, there'll be 6 more. These are paid out of Title I grant, or this grant, or that grant. They're not in the request, but they're there so you can see them.
Okay.
That these people exist, they get paid, but they get paid either by, you know, preschool tuition or some grant fund or something like that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Grateful for your time to come in.
Mr. Chair, I'll bring up Bob Bushway, who's our town assessor. Just a little history. Bob presented the FY18 tax base to the Board of Selectmen. They voted on it unanimously last Monday. So,
Very good. Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening. Bob Bushwaite, Chief Appraiser. So I thought I'd give maybe just an overview about what my department does. We're a fairly small staff of 3 people, including myself. And I think the major function of the department is overseeing the total value of the town, and which is about $5.6 billion of taxable real estate. So what we strive to do is inspect all property in town. There's about 7,200 single-family homes, about 8,600 total parcels in the town. So each and every year, we're constantly tracking sales and determining fair market value for the assessed values. So sometimes it's trying to hit a moving target the way property values have been lately. But that's our primary function. We've got 2 great clerks who administer things like motor vehicle excise abatements. We also have senior exemptions for folks that qualify. A certain age and income qualifications that are mandated by the state. But we do offer exemptions for folks. There's also exemptions for certain veterans, blind, et cetera. So we do have some property tax breaks, and we try to give a presentation to the senior center each year explaining what those exemptions are. As we have an aging population in town, we're always trying to keep those folks in mind as well. So that's kind of our, the general overview of our department. And if there's specific questions I can answer, I'm happy to do that.
Tom?
Bob, just if you could give the committee maybe an overview of some of the things we're going to see as budget time, like the overlay account and what that means.
Sure.
And it's changed a little bit over the past couple of years because now I understand it's just one.
Right.
Year by year, it's one. And then a little bit about Prop 2.5 and kind of how that works.
Okay. So the assessors, the Board of Assessors are responsible for an overlay account, and basically what that is it funds, it's a pot of money each year that the assessors control, and it basically covers things like abatements, exemptions, like I was just talking about, or, properties that are overvalued if we have to give property tax back each year, unpaid taxes, senior work off. So it's typically probably $200,000, $300,000 per year. And anything that the assessors don't use, they declare it overlay surplus, and it goes back into the general fund. So that's typically been around $150,000, $200,000 per year. And I monitor that on an annual basis. And once we've satisfied all those debts, then we turn it back to the town.
So basically, as we see the budget when it comes in, you'll see a budget expenditure for what's going into the overlay, and it's the closest thing I can come to is a bad debt reserve.
Exactly.
That you're putting it in there, and it's required statutorily to stay there until it's certain that it's not needed any longer. It used to be year by year that you do it, and you have to keep track of it year by year.
Right. Yeah. So thanks. That with the new municipal law bill that they passed last year, we had to keep track of individual years. Now it's one pot of money, which is a little bit easier to manage, so to speak. So
it accrues year to year?
Yes.
So is there a total that we ever see of what it sits in, what sits in that account, and is it ever reversed for any reason?
Yes. I mean, the town accountant tracks the total overlay of what the balances are. I work with the town accountant. We go back and forth to make sure that we have enough monies to cover prior year. There's appellate tax board cases, for example, that we need to monitor. Some of the big utility, Verizon Wireless had several years of litigation that they had with the whole state. So those are kind of the big chunks of money that we had to reserve. And then once those cases are resolved, then that money's turned back. And then Tom mentioned Prop 2.5, how that works. So one of the real important things that we do, I think, is monitor all the new growth in town. So all the new houses, additions, renovations. We get about 1,500 building permits per year that we're responsible to go out and inspect and make sure that these properties are being assessed fairly. Any growth as a result of the new construction in town is called new growth, taxable growth, and the Department of Revenue allows the town to increase the 2.5 plus new growth. So this year it was about $800,000 in additional property taxes. We had several new houses go up. We had Woodmere, the condominiums on Woodmere off Brosho Road. That was a big driver, and there's a few smaller subdivisions that we track, in addition to renovations and additions and things like that. So, I like to think that it's a very important function that we do each year. It's, we're a small department, but what we generate for the town, or the revenue that comes out of the assessor's office, funds about 70% of the town's budget.
Oh, yes.
So.
I've got a question on Prop 2.5.
Sure.
Is Prop 2.5 dictated by property, or is it dictated townwide? Meaning, if my value went up by X percent, am I subject to that 2.5%, or is the town in general subject to that 2.5%?
Right, that's a great question. Sometimes your property taxes will increase more than 2.5%. That 2.5% refers to the tax levy. So if your value goes up, or if your taxes go up 5%, it just means that it's dispersed over that 2.5% increase. So somebody else's taxes might have gone down less than 2.5%. So I get that question a lot. If you put an addition on your house, there's a good chance your property taxes will go up more than the 2.5%. So that's really tied to the total levy of the town, plus new growth. So it ends up being about 3.5% or 4% each year, because we have new growth and also any debt exclusion, which Jim will probably touch on a little bit. But those are projects that the town has for building schools, libraries. Things are debt excluded from year to year. It's kind of revolved like a credit card. Once that debt's paid off, it comes off the tax levy. So it's not strictly 2.5%. It's a 2.5% plus a couple of other things like new growth and debt exclusions.
Overrides.
An override, yes. Yes, good point.
Any other questions? Oh, Margie.
I have a general question, because I have a real estate background. I noticed quite a bit, and I'm just curious how you handle this, or maybe it's not done. A realtor is selling a home. Beautiful 3,000 square foot home, 3 bedrooms, updated kitchen, full attic, finished basement. Now you go to the tax base, boy, that's a 2,000 square foot home with 1 bathroom that they're paying taxes on. And I see this quite a bit. I don't know what you can do to update it. We seem to be losing a lot of property taxes by no one being responsible to make this information known. Maybe if a realtor sees it, they need to let town hall know there's got to be something that we can do to get this additional revenue in there, because I see it all the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. A couple of things that could be happening there. We value real estate as of January 1st of the prior year. So a lot of times additions and renovations, it's something that sells today with updated kitchens and baths. They might have pulled a permit a year ago, but we're assessing as of January 1st, 2017. So we're almost, when the tax bill goes out at the end of December, it's going to have a FY18 value on it. That fiscal 18 value is actually the date of assessment's January 1st, 2017. So it's...
I'm not talking about that. I'm
so it's a
talking
little
about
dated.
People that have updated up years ago.
Right, well, we do, yeah.
No one, I know, personally, I've seen it. And
Right.
check tax records, and some of them are 5, 10 years old. And boy, they've been getting away without paying additional. Sometimes they don't take out permits, and we know that's an issue. Not everyone
Right.
is as honest as everyone in this room. So I just think it's something that needs to be addressed. There's a lot of revenue that we could be getting in the town.
Can I just butt? I hate to butt in, but no, I don't. In terms of Prop 2.5, what you're talking about, Maggie, is would not increase the revenue to the town at all, but it's a fairness issue. Because the revenue of the town is last year's tax levy plus 2.5%.
Right.
So it doesn't make any difference, who's got what in their houses. But people that have done things to their houses, obviously, and haven't reported, haven't pulled building permits, it means that other people in the town may be unfairly paying some of their burden.
That's what I mean, yeah.
Right.
It should be redistributed then.
Exactly. I mean, we're always going
I
out
know.
trying to update the records. I mean, we use the internet a lot with MLS and, Redfin and Realtor.com. So we do pick up a lot of information, but unfortunately, you're right. I mean, sometimes people, they don't take out permits. A lot of times we don't find out about it until, A, it's sold or it's currently on the market, and then you find out.
Imagine if
There's
you
some
passed a law that
discrepancy.
if a real estate agent went in there and it didn't jive with your records, that they weren't able to sell this piece of property until it was updated and the reassessment was made. Boy, that would be such an easy way to begin the ball rolling, maybe. I don't know.
So if I might, there is a conversation going on between Mr. Bushway and the building commissioner about connecting the dots between the permit software application and his appraisal software application to catch permits that are pulled in the building commissioner's office that may red flag the appraiser to go down and reassess a piece of property in town.
Assuming that works well, do you see a need to augment the staff to address this? Because, I mean, there's a lot of building that's going on in town, and probably more coming forward with some of the projects that have been discussed. So I guess that's a question that one has to contemplate going forward.
I mean, I think ideally it would be nice to have a deputy assessor, if you will, that would be doing field work. Right now, we contract out a little bit of that work to Patriot Properties, but ideally, I think an in-house person would work better in prior towns I've been in. That's typically how I like to have it run, and there's more oversight. And it's just a better process, I think.
Well, in this case, the oversight leads directly to an enhanced revenue base.
Exactly.
And that's an investment, I think, after a fashion. It's not an expense per se. Sure, you're paying for somebody, but what they're generating by going out and seeing what is maybe not being reported and then therefore captured in the tax base is, I think, in everybody's interest to see happen. But are there any other questions?
I just want to revisit what Tom had said about additional revenues, and I guess I need just a little bit of clarification because it sounds like there's a little bit of a difference. If there is work that's done on a house in a renovation, is that exempt from the 2.5%? Or, like you said, is it an equity issue? You just basically pulling out?
Well, it depends on what it is.
That's my question. Is, you know, if you've had work done and it's not showing up, you know, if you've
Probably a new kitchen, no, a new room added to the house, yes.
Right. Any type of, typically, usually when you get your assessed value, it's just a market adjustment if you haven't done major renovations. But if there's like an addition put on or you've added a bathroom and things like that, so you'll have a market adjustment in addition to the improvements that you made to your property. So that's counted as new growth. So we have to segregate the increase in value. Is it a market adjustment or is an additional increase? That's slotted as new growth, which is over and above 2.5%.
Bob, how do they make a determination when, on your assessments, certain people's property, kitchen, shape? Because I look at all the time, good, fair, poor, because that makes a difference in the amount of tax you're paying. I've seen that. Now, my kitchen might be fair, someone else's is poor, but yet it looks brand new with all, who does that? The people that come out?
Yes.
But people don't let them in all the time, even though they come out every 3 years. Come on, how many homes do they miss? So how does that happen if they don't go out to a home? How does that good, fair, how do you make an adjustment for that? Maybe you charge them the most and they'll let them in the next time.
Well, yeah, you do the best you can with the information you have, basically.
Can I just add, I've experienced the work permit issue with the increased value. So when I moved in, I had my taxes at a certain value. Then the following year, they went up. So, of course, I go to the office and I asked, well, why in the world did my taxes go up? And sure enough, it was the assessed value because the prior owner pulled the permits late and the evaluation didn't happen. So I think that process works. So I don't know that there's an issue sort of with pulling the permits. So maybe if there's, other ways you could use other resources, but that seems to work well.
Right.
Or at least it did in my case.
I mean, that's not uncommon. A lot of people, right before they sell their house, will, do some renovations to get top dollar, so. Yeah, it's a good point, though. Thank you.
Any final questions? Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
for coming.
Jim, you want to come up? Town Treasurer Jim McAuliffe, come up. Jim sees it all in his office.
Yeah, in our office, our responsibilities, we collect real estate tax, personal property, motor vehicles, boat tax, departmental receipts. We help out with the water, sewer, stormwater drain bills. We do municipal lien certificates, trash stickers, large item stickers, annual stickers, recycling bins, parking tickets. We take care of the unemployment, the Affordable Care Act information, EEOC reporting. We do notary services in the office. That's on the collector side. On the treasurer side, we invest the money, do bonding. Yeah, what else do we got?
Don't forget payroll.
Yes, we do, and we also do payroll. In our office, I have a payroll clerk, I have an assistant treasurer, an assistant collector, and I got a 20-hour part-time employee that fills in. She does the municipal lien certificates, she'll take care of the deputy collector's work for excise tax, and she works the desk. Last year, we did 1,011 municipal lien certificates for attorneys, and it's $50 per municipal lien certificate, so that revenue is generated through our office. Any questions? We also do tax takings, foreclosures.
Yes, please.
How are the collection rates? And are they better or worse in this economy than they?
Our collection rates, we're always up in the 99th percentile. We're one of the better towns in the state. We do very well in collections. I think for last year, for 17, there's 187 parcels still outstanding. Some of them owe $5. Some of them haven't paid at all, but that's the amount of bills that are still outstanding. It's about 479,000. We collect 4 or 5 a day. By the time we get around to tax taking, it's usually down to about 100. I send the first round of letters out, I get that down, and usually we're filing between 10 and 20 liens a year now. But in most of those liens come down to maybe people are unemployed temporarily or somebody's in a nursing home. And you for the 20 you may file this year, 20 you're paying off. So it's pretty, static number year over year.
Jim, do you want to talk about, I was very enlightened last year that 4% of the revenue for our budget comes from excise tax. And that's something that has to be forecasted for the year going forward based on trends that have taken place. And I think this year we saw a very high number from where we forecasted. And if you want to just touch upon how that's calculated. And
excise tax, it's tied in with the economy a little bit. A lot of people now start leasing their cars instead of buying. And when you buy a car, a lot of times you hang on to it for 10 years. And the way it works when excise tax is the first year it's 90%, $25 per thousand, then drops to 60% the second year, 45%, 25%, 10%. So for the fifth year, you're paying 10%, $25 per thousand until the day you get rid of the car. Mm-hmm. With leasing, they're usually 3-year leases, so you get 90, 60, 45, 90, 60, 45. So it helps the town because you're generating more money. In a bad economy, if people buy cars and they hang on to them forever, that number will go down. So it does fluctuate. There are a lot of cars in this town. We send out probably about 26,000 excise tax bills a year. And on top of that, we collect the first round, we'll collect about 75%. We send demand letters out. The 25% remaining, we'll collect another 10% on that. 15% goes down to the deputy collector. Mm-hmm. Then he makes an attempt. He'll mail a warrant out. He'll hand deliver a warrant. Then we mark you at the registry. Then when you go to renew your license or your registration, you have to pay the man.
Yeah.
So last year during the season, most of you that were on the warrant committee remember this, we had a tough time estimating that number. The town accountant didn't want to overestimate that number. It can cost you when it's 4% of your anticipated revenue. So there was that whole debate as to where we should forecast that number to. But the trend is continuing to grow in the amount of money we collect from excise tax. So it's when perhaps will the other shoe drop and it fall off the cliff, and we anticipate more than we're going to collect.
Yeah, there's no good flow. And when we sit in front of Standard & Poor's for bonding, one of the things I like about this town is we never overshoot and overestimate our receipts. They like the conservative nature of the town and the way we give conservative numbers.
How frequently do they come in for this review?
Well, Standard & Poor's, anytime you're going out for a bond,
Okay.
they'll come in.
But S&P and Moody's don't come in on a routine basis just to check out and take the temperature?
It depends upon the issuance. If you're doing a small band, they won't come in. If you're doing a large band or a bond, they'll come in. It's actually a sit-down meeting over the phone.
Oh, okay.
So Powers & Sullivan, our auditing services firm, will be presenting to the Board of Selectmen next Monday. When that is presented, I can forward it to this committee for you to take a look at.
That would be very good.
Yeah, and if you need the previous Standard & Poor's report on the town, I have that on my desktop.
That might be interesting to send around.
It's good information.
Yeah, no, I'd be interested to read it. Are there any other questions?
Jim, could you just talk a little bit about the number of services that you have online now and how that's working out? Are there any more you can put online?
Well, we have everything online. I was thinking about doing credit card in the office and debit card, but the object is to get people out of the office.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can sit at home, and if you want to pay your real estate bill, your personal property bill, it's all there. This year we updated the online collection services, where before we take the file down the date after it was due. Now we leave it up, and we do have an interest counter on it. So you can pay the bill a month late, and the interest will be calculated on it. I mean, we're working with Unibank to upgrade a lot of these services, and they're listening. They're keeping up with the other softwares that are out there.
What's the utilization of online versus somebody who comes and pays it in person versus mailing it in?
With the real estate tax, about 50%, maybe a little bit more, maybe about 54% paid through escrow. So we'll get,
Oh, that's right, the banks.
we'll get a wire the day before taxes due for about $8.4 million. Then it's about 25, like 25% will come in and pay the bill. The other people either mail it or do it online. Online's still not huge. It's not as big as you'd think. It is growing every year because younger people
They like to do that.
like to do things online. One of the big problems is people think when they go online out of their own checking account and send it, they think they're saving a tree. They cut a check to us. They send it to us. Now we got to find out what that check's for. Half the time they'll leave their old water bill number on it, or an excise tax bill, and a real estate bill, and it's sort of a puzzle you have to solve. The best way is just go into the town website and pay it right on the town online payment. That way you actually do save a tree.
How much of a fee do you assume?
Well, we don't assume a fee. If you pay online with the town, it's 25 cents for an online check. If you use a credit card, you shouldn't use a credit card because it's $2.50 per 100. So if you're right on the border of going on a trip and you need a few extra miles, fire away, but for the most part, you shouldn't use a credit card when you're paying a tax bill.
Are you allowed to pay more than the amount due, or if you're paying online?
You can pay whatever you like online, but it's got to come up with the amount that you have, and I believe you can change that.
Because I actually went into your office a few years back, and I was paying 2 quarters. I was going away actually for a few months, and the person said that I couldn't pay the next quarter. They had no place to put it.
Yeah, it depends.
What does that mean, no place to put it?
Well, it depends which quarter it is, because the bill's generated every 6 months.
Yeah, but
So you
can't take my money. You do a reversing entry, or something later on. I mean,
you can't.
so now what I do?
Under Mass General law,
check.
you can't carry over from fiscal year to fiscal year. So every May, if there's credits on the bills, we have to send that back to the taxpayer.
Oh, well.
You can do it if you want to pay, come in November and you're going to Florida for 6 months.
Right.
A lot of people will give you a check and say, could you put this in on February 2nd?
Yeah.
And I'll put it in the drawer, I'll put it in February
I
2nd.
just write 2 separate checks and state what they're for, and now I don't have any problems. But when you go into the office, they didn't know what to do about it for some reason.
Under Mass General law, you can't carry your credit balance forward on a tax bill. And that's every May. We'll send out a couple $100,000 in credits that have been sitting on bills back to the taxpayer.
Jim, what's your expectation for your preparation for your budget?
My budget,
When it'll be prepared?
My budget's fairly simple. It's postage, bills, envelopes. personnel.
And personnel, right?
Yeah.
And that doesn't change with
It
any
doesn't
agreement,
change. With postage bills and envelopes, they do go up every year because more houses are coming online, and every house is going to generate 2 millions for tax bills, a couple excise tax bills, then you're going to get water bills, stormwater drain bills. So every house that comes online is probably going to generate 10 different bills from the town.
Are you required to send out hard copy, or can you do it electronically to save?
Right now, everybody gets a hard copy. That way they can compare it to the escrow. And they're coming on board, and it's in the works with the bill opt-out, where you can physically go in, hit the button somewhere down the line and say, I don't need the bill, I get escrow.
Well, particularly if the bank is paying it, that it's escrowed at the bank, and, you know, who sees that bill anyway?
But a lot of people like to have that bill, they can put it in when they're doing the taxes, they can pull it out.
Right. Well, they get,
No, to not escrow properly. So.
that's true. Some banks will, that can happen.
More frequently than you
Yeah,
think.
that can happen with some frequency, yeah.
Especially if you're refining your house and the attorneys
the
have software
reconciliation.
estimating it. Instead of calling and saying, hey, how you doing? How much is the tax bill? They'll estimate it, and they'll always estimate it under. So they'll always leave a $30 bill hanging out there for the taxpayer.
And that reconciliation should be simple, but nothing simple.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Jim, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
I'll bring up the town accountant, Amy Dexter.
Amy, thank you for coming.
Hi.
So very, very similar to you digesting the school's budget on December 7th. Amy and I will sit down and digest that. To Chuck said, it's a very well thought out book with everything you need to see, but that will become part of Amy's major spreadsheet that she runs every year to, you literally just drop numbers in there and find out where we are, and then wait for the revenue numbers to come in. Wait for Jim's estimate of excise tax. We already know what the growth's going to be from the town assessor, and we attend a meeting in late January, Mass Municipal Association, where the governor comes and releases preliminary numbers for local receipts, which is about 10% of our revenue annually between Chapter 70 money and local receipts. But, thank you.
Great. Just to tell you a little bit about my department, I oversee the accounting department. What we do is we oversee all of the financial activities for the town, all of the financial reporting, and we're kind of the watchdog. We're going to monitor departmental budgets, make sure that they don't overspend, make sure any bills that come across for payment fall within the guidelines of their budget, that they've been properly procured under Chapter 30B. Now we have a new chief procurement officer, so that will alleviate some of the work on our plate, but we will still, when we pay it, still monitor that stuff. I have myself, the town accountant, and I have 3 full-time staff members that report directly to me. We have a assistant town accountant. Basically, she's responsible for auditing of the payroll. She does not process the payroll, but all payrolls submitted are first reviewed and audited by her before they go to the treasurer's office for processing. Basically, what that involves is she's going to make sure that the rates that people are being paid are within the contract for those unions or those personal contracts or within Chapter 13. She's also going to look at payment for paid time off. So for instance, if somebody's sick the day before the holiday, some contracts don't allow that holiday pay. So she's kind of the little watchdog of those kind of things to make sure that we don't pay anything that we legally shouldn't pay. I rely on her a lot. We work very closely together. She brings things to my attention and vice versa. She does that for the payroll. She also does that for all payments to vendors. Everything comes through her. With that being said, we are a bit decentralized. For example, the schools have an accounts payable person that works in the business office. She does she does all of the data entry for the schools, and what the assistant town accountant does is reviews those bills and just posts them. But the person at the schools does all the work to enter those. We are going to a purchase order system that will make things much more efficient, that we have started to roll out. Once the chief procurement officer came on board, she's undertaking that project, and she's working closely with departments to bring them online to the purchasing system. What that means is when my assistant town accountant actually does the data entry for the vendor payables, that there'll be a PO in there already coded with the proper account number, and that means if there's an approved PO, it means the chief procurement officer has approved it and made sure that it's followed within the guidelines of Chapter 30B. Chapter 30B is a section of Mass General laws that pretty much dictates how a municipality can purchase. So, for instance, there's certain dollar parameters and thresholds that will say if it's over a certain dollar amount, it needs to go out to the bid process. If it's between, I won't get the numbers right because it changed recently, but it used to be between 10 and 25,000, you could get 3 quotes. They could be verbal, written. Anything under 10,000 would be best business practices. She's now monitoring all that. I'm helping her as I can because she's just part-time. She's 20 hours a week. She's there to assist not only the town, but the school side too. So that's pretty much what the assistant town accountant does. Then there's a principal bookkeeper. She pretty much reconciles and keeps track of all the town's capital projects. She's a huge support for the Department of Public Works director, as well as the Selectman's office. Anything I need to know about the Department of Public Works budget, the enterprise funds, their capital projects.
Snow and ice control.
Snow and ice. Their payrolls, she does all of the DPW payroll. And when I say payroll, one thing that this committee should understand is each department, not each department, but most of the major departments have an admin person within their staff that does a lot of their monitoring of their budget and their payroll. And by payroll, what I mean is they would actually log into the payroll system and they would input their hours, that kind of thing. And then it comes to my assistant town accountant who audits it, and then it goes to the treasurer's office, Jim's area, and they actually process it, cut the checks, they monitor the deductions, the taxes, things like that. So with that being said, she does all the payrolls for DPW, the Selectman's office, the technology department, accounting, my department, and any of the smaller ones that don't have that administrative support. The departments that do have administrative support would be the schools, fire, police, cemetery.
And they do their own
library.
payrolls, and that process is duplicated there so that there are enough hands and eyes to make sure that everything is tight.
Right. So it really,
Hours are appropriately allocated, and you're in compliance with the contracts, et cetera.
yeah, so there's a lot of double checks there because you have your department head signing it off, you have the assistant town accountant or the school business manager signing off. I'm looking at it, and then Jim's office is looking at it. So there's a lot of checks and balances, and payroll, as you guys are aware, is a very significant amount of the budget, so it's extremely important. And then the third person that works in my office is a financial analyst. She does a lot of the day-to-day accounting work. She's doing monthly reconciliations of cash and all of my balance sheet accounts, all of my assets and liabilities. She's a huge support when it comes to preparing for the annual financial audit. She's a huge support when it comes to me preparing for the Department of Revenue reporting such as free cash certification, Schedule A, which is similar to a corporate tax return. We have to go online to the gateway system and report a bunch of financial information about the town. She is a huge help with the budgeting process. What we're doing this year, and we have done in prior years, but we're really trying to bring it all together, and my department is this person has been a huge help as we've offered her assistance to the different department heads with, if you need help with your budget, if you have any questions, if you want us to review your budget before you submit it, whether you're a separate board or committee or whether you're a department under the Board of Selectmen, come see myself or come see the financial analyst and we'll review it. So she's undertaken trying to just kind of keep track of what we have, which ones we've looked at, which ones we've sent back for correction, so that hopefully when it comes to this committee, you won't experience some of that frustration and some of those problems that you've experienced in the past where maybe it wasn't submitted to us for reviews first and there were some errors. So we're hoping to cut down on that. And then my role is overseeing all the financial reporting and overseeing that. Work collaboratively with the schools and Glenn Pavlicek, as well as the assessors and the treasurer collector's office. We all are intertwined. We all try to support one another. It's important to note that one thing that people get confused that they often think is under accounting is payroll. In most municipalities, it falls under the treasurer's office. So they're processing, we're auditing.
Who oversees the town's investments?
That would be the treasurer's office.
And are there limitations on where you can put the money? Does it have to go into a state fund, or how is it handled?
Well, we have a town investment policy that I could forward you also. With trust funds, you have to do it off the legal list. The legal list is down to about 22 stocks. The Mass Treasury Collectors Association has a legislation in that they want to do the prudent investor rule, but so far that's been stalled. So you don't have a lot to invest in for stocks on the equity side. And we're doing a lot of CDs, step-laddering CDs, and
at these rates?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of other options.
I would think,
it's always safe to go over.
This is my business. Intermediate bond funds will get a little better than that. We're in a real estate investment trust.
But there's always so many things you can invest in. And it's a boilerplate investment policy straight out of the Mass Treasury Collectors. I mean, the first rule is you don't lose taxpayers' money. That's what you go by.
I understand that.
Yeah, so we do have two different investment houses. We have Bartholomew does the library. Rich Rogers from Abbey Capital does the trust funds.
How often are those put out? How often are those put out to bid?
Out to bid, Rich Rogers has been doing it for 20 years. We had a third.
My point exactly.
I don't get that.
We had a third person that was doing one of the cemetery accounts, and he absolutely blew it up. Rich Rogers keeping it brought back to where it should be. Bartholomew, the libraries went out a couple of years ago. There's only about 3 municipal investment houses. There's Abbey Capital, there's Bartholomew, and I think Morgan Stanley does a little. But for most town treasurers, they use one or the other. Bartholomew, Abbey. And we do get a hometown discount because Abbey Capital he lives in the town of Milton, so we do better than other towns he deals with.
Thank you.
Okay. The only other things I want to mention about our department is, as you guys know, that we're dealing with a $100 million budget, inclusive of the 3 enterprise funds: water enterprise, sewer enterprise, and stormwater enterprise. The town has more than $50 million in assets. We have more than 200 what I refer to as sub-funds. Those are different special revenue funds, different grant funds, different capital project funds, trust funds. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on, and we have a small staff, but we accomplish a lot. The other piece of a role that I've been trying to help out is with the budgeting, trying to assist the town administrator as much as I can with preparing the budget, trying to bring it all together, this horrendous spreadsheet that most of you have seen. As well as in the past, we've tried to pull together financial forecasts just with the sheer resource issue. Yes, the goal is to do that every year, but we haven't been able to reach that goal. We've really only done it once with transition and different department heads, and just short on resources, it's a bit difficult to pull it all together. I'm also co-chair with Mr. Hurley on the capital committee. That's a lot of work also, as well as ex officio member on a retirement board. So I have some involvement there. I think that's pretty much everything I can think of anyway.
Are there any other questions? That was very good, very comprehensive. Tom?
Amy, could you just go over again, same as Bob, some of the things that we're dealing with, like, free cash and just a bird's eye, what is free cash in general, how is it calculated? Maybe talk about some of the revolving funds and, how they enter into the picture.
So I'll start with free cash because that's the question I get most this time of year. And if you ask me before Department of Revenue certifies it, I will tell you we have no free cash. There's no such thing until the Department of Revenue certifies it. The reason why I stick behind that party line is because I do a calculation, Department of Revenue does a calculation, and then we compare it. I've been working with our DLS rep for 3 weeks now, trying to iron out some things that are complicated or we're on a different page with, and we're close. I'm hoping to have that certification hopefully before the holiday. A lot you'll find in the budgeting and the capital budgeting process relies on that number. We try to only use free cash for non-recurring expenses, capital purchases, one-time expenses that are not going to recur. The reason being is basically what free cash is, I'll try to kind of simplify it. There's this big calculation behind it that if you look at it, if I showed it to you, it would mean nothing to you, because we basically start with a fund balance, which is kind of like, in the private world, is like retained earnings. So you have what's called the fund balance, and you deduct a lot of things out of it. You deduct some of your receivables, and then you deduct any deficits and other funds outside of the general fund. And there's all kinds of things that you add back and take out. And the calculation, when you look at it, doesn't mean much. But what's the important part is what I refer to as the proof of free cash. So, for instance, I believe at June 30th of 16, free cash was certified somewhere around $1.3 or $1.4 million. So the bigger question that's more meaningful, I think, to the taxpayer or the residents is, all right, so if we have $1.3 million in free cash, where did that come from? What generated that? So the main things that would account for that is when budgets, when departments don't spend their full appropriation. Okay, so if I have a budget of $500,000 and say I have an employee that makes $100,000 a year, and say they resign and they leave, and it takes me, just to make the math easy, 6 months to fill that position. I might have $50,000 left in salaries that I don't spend. So out of my $500,000 budget, I turn back $50,000, meaning I had an appropriation I didn't spend. That, in essence, accounts for some of the free cash. Similar, since motor vehicle excise tax, you'll hear us talking a lot about that this year. I admit I'm ultra conservative. When I'm doing the revenues, I'm ultra conservative. And motor vehicle excise tax out of everything is the most complicated one. Not because it's hard to understand, but it's hard to predict. If you look at the trends in motor vehicle excise tax, it's like if you watch The Price is Right, the little hiker, boom, boom. So I take that into account when I'm trying to figure out the number, right? So we've had that trend, and all of a sudden, he hasn't fallen off the cliff yet in a while. So the past couple of years, we've used 5-year average or 3-year average to figure out. That's what I'm comfortable with. Now we're going to be, and I've already talked to Glenn, he's going to have a big part in us trying to budget the revenues, right? The more of us that can put our heads together, maybe we can get a better idea of what that number should be. So say I'm conservative, or the town is conservative how we budget these revenues. Like Bob Bushway mentioned, real estate tax is fairly easy, right? Well, that's 70% of your budget. Then you have the local aids. Usually in the early process, we'll say, well, let's just be conservative and go in 2% less than what we got last year and wait and see what the governor comes out with. But then you have this other local receipts, which is only about, do you remember what the total is? I think 6 million? Yeah.
7 million.
7 million, of which I think our budget for motor vehicle is 3.6. So that's the big nut in the small little pool that we really have to estimate. But say we're conservative and we say motor vehicle excise was 3.6 and we take in 4 million. Well, that's another 400 that could go to free cash. So there's things like that to add. There's a bunch of other things, but to oversimplify it, it's mainly turn back, so appropriations not spent, and revenues collected in excess of what we projected. I don't know if anybody has questions.
And today we have 0 free cash.
Yes. Tomorrow, we might have some.
Yes.
But today.
Are there any questions?
I have a quick question. As a practice, and so do you allow departments, if they foresee that example you just gave us, beyond the vacancy for 6 months, $50,000, so if they were able to forecast they'd have a surplus in their budget for the year, do you allow departments to use those dollars to spend?
Yes, but I don't allow it. But yes, Mass General law allows. It used to be called the 3% rule. With the Municipal Modernization Act, which passed a year ago, they lifted the 3% cap. So what it used to be was, if you had something like that, and you had a $500,000 budget, well, $50,000 is 10%. So you could not use that for something else. You were limited to 3%. So Mass Municipal Modernization lifted the 3%, which means you could spend the full 50 on something else, but it requires the approval of the Warrant Committee and the Board of Selectmen, right?
Correct.
To do a...
for the year-end transfer.
Yes,
We call it
it's
a
still
year-end transfer. So they would have to put in writing a request to do it, how much they wanted to use, what they wanted to use it for, and then it would go, I'm not sure how the strong TA administration plays in, but basically in the past it's gone to the Selectmen and the Warrant Committee to approve. Usually it's in the last couple weeks of the year, the last month. You can only do the year-end transfers in the last 60 days, last 45 or 60 days of the fiscal year, which means by the time it's coming to the Warrant Committee, usually you guys have authorized the chair to approve those, so you might not really see them.
There's a certain amount of days before the end of the fiscal year and a certain amount of days after the end of the fiscal year that you can, I forget, and it's something like 45 days.
You can't do it before 60 days before, so the earliest you can do it is May 1st. So if you know that in July, you can't really say, I'm going to not hire that person and use it for something else, because you might get denied.
And that being said, the town meeting appropriates, for most departments, a salary and a general expense. If you don't use it on postage, you can use it on something else. You can't cut across between salary and
expenses.
Right.
Without the transfer. And then also, the modernization rule allows it to go from department to department now. So for instance, in the past, some of the things we've done it for is snow and ice. Another one of the big budgets that's really hard to really predict and to come up with is the group insurance budget. That's a big one. It's a high dollar one, and sometimes if we don't have as many people enroll in the group insurance as we think, sometimes we'll come under, and there might be some money there that we might transfer to the DPW to cover the snow and ice deficit. So in the past, we've been fortunate, even in some of those really bad winters, that we haven't had to have a deficit in snow and ice. And that's the one appropriation that you legally can end the year with a deficit. And since I've been here, we haven't had that. Because we've been able to manage within the budget to somehow try to cover it. But yes, you can do those. And then there's also reserve fund. I don't know if people are, maybe you could quickly explain that because it's.
I don't think we need to go into that right now. I think we can wait. We can table that for when they become relevant when we're looking at the budget. I think many of us will get the concept pretty easily.
Amy, you did bring up the point of the group insurance, and I'm not sure if everybody knows that the town is self-insured, and maybe you want to just kind of explain how that trust fund works a little bit.
I'll do my best.
In general.
Yeah, so basically the town is self-insured. So what that means is, I think we have, if Paige was here, she could explain it better. We pay all the claims. So we have Blue Cross, Blue Shield. We pay, the employee pays, I believe it's 22% of the premium, and the town pays 78%. We have negotiated with unions to
it's going to be 76, 24 in fiscal year 19.
So when we withhold the premiums from the employees and the town pays the 80%, that goes into a trust fund. And then all of the claims are paid out of the trust fund. So we have to raise we have to appropriate the money for the 80% out of the general fund. And that's what you see in the warrant. That represents what's now 78%.
So that doesn't actually represent a premium. It's not, well, part of it is because we have this stop-loss insurance. So we pay the first X number of dollars. Do you remember what that is?
I want to say it's 100,000 or something, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
That's more of an HR question.
Right, and then anything over that is covered by a Blue Cross insurance plan. But it is a guesstimate in terms of what we're funding into that thing, so it's not like you get a bill for the whole thing from an insurance company.
Right, and a lot of it's based on experience rates, and when I'm trying to put together the budget in October and November, we don't have a lot of data for the year yet, so it's another one of those that kind of comes in a little bit. You'll find that one does change. You might get frustrated with that because we might take another look come January, and it might improve or hopefully not get worse. But again, I tend to be conservative on that so that we don't get surprised come January or February. I'd rather tell you that we can reduce that budget than to tell you we need to find another couple $100,000 when we're already balanced.
Are there any other questions? Amy, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So just in closing, George, as we talked months ago about the, last year there were two budgets going on. We have one budget being submitted by all the department heads. We actively look forward to working with the subcommittees. I think a lot of the work can be done before we get to this table with the subcommittees. Feel free to CC myself or Amy or Glenn or any of the school officials if you have any questions or follow-up questions with respect to the subcommittee work. I think that work, which couldn't happen last year because we had so much going on with the transition and the two budgets going on, I think will be very fruitful this year towards getting to a balanced budget sooner. And again, it all depends.
That's in everybody's interest. I think we're all happy to do that.
So,
very happy to cooperate there.
We appreciate all your work. And
Just
Just one quick question. In the future going forward, when you do your agenda items, we really would appreciate if you just don't say by various officials that they're speaking. It would be nice to know what is being presented before us. There are half of the members that have been here before, and everyone did a wonderful job, but perhaps we might have had additional questions had we know who was presenting to be able to share with people. That's all we ask. We want to be treated with respect, and we want to be able to do the best job possible, but we can't do that if you don't give us the information ahead of time, not at the last moment. We really would appreciate that.
Duly noted.
And I'd like to point out that you have treated us with the utmost respect.
Yeah.
So just to make it clear that you have.
We appreciate you coming.
Well, yeah, we look forward to working with everyone. As you can see, there's a great team here. And if we got through last spring and winter with the back and forth with the contingent, non-contingent, people coming up to the table 5, 6, 7 times each, me being new in the town government role. So we appreciate your patience and look forward to a successful.
I'm optimistic it will go smoothly.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yep.
Thank you all for coming. I'm grateful for your attendance. We have, is there any new business that anybody has? Because there was something that I did want to bring up. I was noodling around a little bit, looking at our role, particularly in light of all the things that have gone on with respect to the special meeting. And I came up with this interesting ethics. Ethics, right. Ethics. God help us, right? Josephson Institute for Exemplary Leadership and Business Ethics. I mean, all of us are to some extent in businesses where there are ethical standards. And this one was developed, believe it or not, for warrant committees, translated into an active language. I can forward this to you, but it ends up sounding kind of like the Boy Scout and Girl Scout oath, where you have various qualities which are proffered as appropriate for behavior and conduct. We talked a little bit about civil discourse at our last meeting, but this lists very common sense and I think, intuitive things like honesty, integrity, promise keeping and trustworthiness, loyalty, fairness, concern for others, respect for others, law-abiding, obviously, commitment to excellence, leadership, reputation, morale, and accountability. And I think we're all obviously professionals in our own rights, but what we are doing as a group and individually has a responsibility, reflects responsibility to the town that we're representing to consider what we do individually as reflecting on us as a group. And I'm particularly interested in making sure that as we go forward, we have a civil discourse and that we consider our activities, professionally and otherwise, to be considering of our roles here at the Warrant Committee and how what we do outside will reflect on our activities and our impartiality and our ability to stay as apolitical as we can. I mean, everybody has opinions. We all have opinions. We see how some of these opinions and polarizations can just run amok, and we're unfortunately witnessing that on a very large level in other parts of the country. But on this little granular level of governance, I think it's very important that we remember that we do have that obligation and to be very, very judicious about how we conduct ourselves, not just because we're televised, but because people know what we do is important, and they look to us for that level of impartiality and honesty, so that we're not going to be viewed as having an agenda or some other subterfuge in which we can cash ourselves one way or another. So.
If perhaps you could forward that to us.
I'm going to. Yes, I will send it around.
At our next meeting, we could debate and perhaps adopt it as guiding principles or guidelines.
I think it's certainly worth all of us looking at these things as I believe we all do conduct ourselves that way. But just to be sure that we're all careful about our role in the community as well. It is not insignificant. This is a very important function that we have. So with that, I guess the next question is, as the school budget is the biggest and the first one that's probably going to come across, and they said it's available the 7th of December, Would it be worthwhile having a meeting that first Monday after it's available? Is that possible? So we can get it started, and that would be the 11th of December, I think.
Would we want a general meeting or the school committee, subcommittee to meet? and review?
Well, here's the question that we have to ask. Do we want to have a presentation, a general presentation to the entire warrant committee with the overview, and then send it to the subcommittee to go and kick it around?
I think so.
I think that makes a little more sense, because this is what percentage of the town budget, a large percentage, and I think it's worth all of us hearing. And I think if we can keep the presentation to, I'll say, I would say to 30 minutes to hit the high points. That would be very valuable. I mean, I know the toughest thing in the world is to distill things down, right? You know, it's much easier to do a 2-hour presentation than a 10-minute presentation. But if that can be prepared, that would be very helpful. And then we can just send it off to the school subcommittee, and then you all can have at it.
Would we have a question and answer period?
Sure. Oh, yes, definitely. No, the 30 minutes is they're telling us what we need to know, or what they want us
Is that
to
when you
know.
bring in the Bibles?
Is that what you
I can bring it before.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, whatever you can circulate, I mean, we would actually like to have it as soon as it's available. So, you know, I know that it's a lot, but we would like to have it as soon as it's available, because the operating rationale is if you can get it to us early enough, we can digest it, and then we can be very pointed in what we're discussing, so we're not going to have a lot of back and forth.
I suppose if you can get it electronically.
We could we can have, Glenn, you can send this out to us before you actually come in to present. The microphone's a good idea.
Depends if you can do it.
It's in a binder, and it's a collection of a large number of spreadsheets, which it would turn into a 75-page PDF, probably.
Maybe just a PowerPoint then.
Yeah.
So PowerPoint,
Distilled down to a PowerPoint would be helpful.
Because we'll be doing a PowerPoint for the school committee on the night of the 6th.
That would be very
I
helpful.
can't imagine it will change
That would
rapidly
be,
between the night of the 6th.
I think that would be a good start.
and the
That would
following.
help us anyway, because I think we can get into we can, do chapter and verse, but if we have the gospel according to at the beginning, that would be very helpful. Okay, thank you. We'll look forward to that. I know they're
Anything you ever
monsters.
wanted to know is in those books.
Yeah, just as long as we have a sense of what we're looking at. Okay, so I think then our sense is that our next meeting will be December 11th at...
Oh, did you have another one scheduled?
No, next Monday.
Yeah,
We
next
had one
Monday.
next Monday. Do we need one next Monday is my question.
Well, the thought was maybe bring some of the other department heads and do the same thing, like the bigger department heads,
We can do that.
DPW.
Is that agreeable to everybody?
Cemeteries, libraries.
Cemeteries, libraries.
Just to get an idea of what their departments are, what they do.
It's on my calendar, so I'm happy to keep it.
Yeah.
This is really helpful.
Like the
27th of November, we
DPW,
can do it.
those
I know we have it scheduled. I want to be sure that everybody's in favor of having it. It's perfectly fine with me.
I think as long as we can keep people in, yes. Or bring people in, I should say.
Not under the town administrator.
Okay, so our next meeting, I'll get in touch. I'll talk to Mike, and we'll get the idea of who is
Mentioned
exactly.
Norton,
Yeah, cemetery, library, yeah.
But we've asked him to coordinate those.
Yeah,
They're not technically under.
Can I just bring a different item up, and I don't know how anyone else feels, or if it even got brought to your attention, but when you asked the question about, was that the bonding company, when the last time it went out to bid,
Yeah.
was that 20 years or something?
Oh, that's the investment manager.
So last year became an issue for people that were here last year, and you were there, about, was it town council, Steve? And the last time that town council services went out to bid was in 1986.
Wow,
And he
30
had-
years.
Oh, so I have an issue with this. I don't understand why it is, but I'm wondering, how do we correct this? How do we go forward? How do we know we're getting the best dollar if
The
nothing
question
goes out
is
to bid?
I don't know, does anybody know this answer? I don't. Is there a statutory requirement
I thought
for
there was.
annual review?
No, for legal services, no statutory
Is
requirement.
there a statutory requirement for a review or biannual review of services provided to a municipality? I don't know the answer to that.
And
Why haven't those?
could we get a list of all contracts, whether it's the bonding company, whether it's any
investment manager, the
any
town council.
professional services with the amounts. And last time that they were awarded a contract and change orders, and when their contract is due, and perhaps maybe it should be put out to bid next time. If you just keep handing someone a job, boom, it's easy to pad it. Or how about goods and services? Is there a central register where we're able to look at what contracts for X amount of dollar is awarded? Is it out to bid? There must be a central register if they're saying, we want you to spend $10,000, $15,000 and upgrade the phone system. Is it handed to someone? Does it go out to bid? I think those are very important.
There is,
I think this would be a great question for the chief procurement officer.
Yeah.
Yes,
exactly right.
Then we can
I'll ask Mike to have
But
it.
to answer your question, there is combis,
What
which
is that?
there's a state purchasing system, which you can go on. You're not required to go out to bid if you buy through the state contract.
Because in theory,
A lot of people
those
do it.
vendors have been already vetted.
Right. And then I will just say this, there's not that many firms that do town.
Yeah, it's a finite.
There's two or three.
It's a finite number of people.
I'm having a hard time following the conversation, to be perfectly honest.
All over the place.
Yeah.
But it's worth asking the question.
Yeah, it's worth asking the question. As someone who works in government, you don't want to be spending all your time doing procurement. You actually have to work. So I think, there's a fine line between, having a plan to procure certain things and then just spending a lot of time, doing RFPs, because that is not...
It's very time consuming.
Yeah, we have someone to do that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question for the chief procurement officer.
Yeah, I don't think we have to keep going round and round on this. I will talk to Mike and ask him to have these questions answered, whether it's himself or the chief procurement officer. Chris.
I have a separate item unless there's other business. This is really just a reminder for people about the open meeting law. As a quorum, we can't talk with I'm not saying this has happened since this is on TV. We cannot have a discussion or express opinions about town business with a quorum or more on email. It has to be in open meeting. Subcommittees, I think we can do whatever we want. But when it comes to anything having to do with expressing opinions or anything that comes close to deliberating public business, the most we can do on email is provide agendas, provide reports, and say logistically when the meetings are going to be, that sort of information. Please do not express any opinions on email.
Yeah, just to add to that, I mean, the general rule is just don't reply to all.
Definitely.
Chris, a past warrant committee was given the opinion that the subcommittees are standing committees, and so a quorum of those trips all the same open meeting law.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
I don't know, it might be something to check,
So do that have
chase
to be
down.
posted, those subcommittee meetings, right? That's right.
And just to
That was the opinion we were given, whether
yeah,
it's right
it
or
would,
not.
to give you an idea of how far the Attorney General carried it.
Yeah,
actually- Don't you, we went through with this town with the hiring of the attorney. We went through that. We debated that back and forth when his contract began, and then we all were made aware of some issues that are actually engaging, keeping the town accountant, the town attorney on because of the historical background and, his familiarity with everything that's all the issues from years back. Do you remember that?
It still deserves fresh air every year.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Continuity is a very good thing, but you still have to look and see it.
My point is that a lot of the things that you're going around about, we've already gone around about. So it would be nice if we had, maybe Ted, these things have already been researched. So before we start doing this again, we should find out maybe if there's already answers.
Okay, that's easy enough to do.
Having Ted or another former chairman, they've already done it.
And Tom, you had something to say too, or at least I was listening to something.
I was just going to make the point. We were talking about subcommittees and open meeting laws, and about 9 years ago, it got carried to the point where there was a meeting between two warrant committee members, the chair and the secretary, one selectman. There was no quorum of any committee or board on this panel meeting that we had 4 or 5 times. It was deemed to be a de facto subcommittee.
Okay.
And we violated open meeting laws. So you've got, I mean, what the attorney general will go to, or the assistant DAs will go to decide what deliberation means and what a committee is really.
Well, the point of the open meeting law, of course, is transparency. We owe that to the people of the town, so I think it's just a useful reminder. So I appreciate the point about the subcommittee, so thank you for that.
Okay, if there's no other new business, our next meeting will be a week from tonight at 7 p.m. in the same place. If that is agreeable to everybody, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thanksgiving, everyone.